Mayor and Council are going to say a few things quickly, but Toole Design is going to take lead on this meeting. And we definitely want to hear directly from you guys. So I'm going to go across the room from Council if they want to say something. I'm going to start with Ward 1, Jimmy, Luke, then Valerie and Jared. Go ahead.
Luke, do you want to start?
I said Jimmy, but you.
Okay, I'm sorry. I was deferring to my younger member. No, I'm here to listen. Appreciate all the people in the community here. As it's been said, we're looking to deal with the traffic and issues, and the streets are issues, and the city wants to make sure we have a holistic plan to not push problems from one street to another, and to see how we can do this in a smart way. So that way we kind of put a hold on doing traffic calming devices for a few months until we can actually get a plan and get the work done in good priority order. Thank you. Thanks everybody for joining.
Thank you, Jimmy. Luke?
Thanks. I just want to say a few things because I know there's been a lot of chatter out there in the listserv or on Facebook or stuff. Just to give folks some context for how we normally go about improving our streets and sidewalks. Probably about 6 years ago, so this is before Selena and I were on the council before us contracted with Toole Design to do an inventory of our streets and sidewalks. So it was just looking at every street and sidewalk, trying to see the condition they were in, and then set a 5-year prioritization plan for which streets and sidewalks or alleys to fix. We completed that 5-year prioritization plan with a couple of exceptions, which I'm not going to get into, but those projects were completed. What we've been talking about here for the last, at least what I've been talking about with constituents for the last couple of years, is the idea of doing a more comprehensive study, of looking holistically at our streets and sidewalks to see, how do we really want to design ourselves? We've got a lot of complaints about safety. We've got a lot of complaints about traffic cutting through. And every time we seem to put a speed hump on one location, it moves the traffic to the next street over. And so there have been complaints about, doing it in sort of that whack-a-mole fashion. And so this is an opportunity for us on several fronts. One is we wanted to, instead of just looking at, what streets need fixing this time, we wanted to look at how are our streets designed? Can they be designed in a way that can be safer for everybody, that can hit a few birds with one stone? Maybe you can increase tree box size. Maybe you can retain more stormwater. Maybe you can make it more friendly for bikers and walkings alike. And there's really an opportunity here for the city with all the federal infrastructure money that's coming down the pike that can help subsidize some of the cost of whatever it is Toole Design and the community comes up with saying that we want out of a sort of a redesign of our streets and sidewalks. So I'm going to get all this out now so that I can stay quiet and listen. I have a lot of thoughts on what can be done. But the point is with this meeting and this project over the next few months is to figure out what you want. Because that's what we're going to invest in. I just appreciate everybody taking their time out to voice their opinion and being here. And I want to thank Toole Design for helping our city move forward. Thanks.
Thank you, Luke. Valerie?
Yeah, thank you everyone for joining tonight. This is a crucial meeting and it's a crucial project that we're working on. Thank you to city staff for pushing up the schedule so that we can be ready in April and May at the latest to get that federal funding. I think that is key, that as soon as we have this plan that we're able to begin implementation of it. Our city residents definitely deserve better infrastructure when it comes to walking and biking. And I also think that it's important that we make the streets, make sure they're manageable for people who do drive in our community. So I'm excited to hear what you all have to say. I'm thankful to Toole Design for coming out and making this happen. And I look forward to getting implementation going as soon as possible.
Thank you so much, Valerie. Jared?
Thank you, everyone, tonight. Thank you.
You're cutting off, Jared.
Oops. Sorry, can you hear me now?
Yes.
Okay. Thank you for
And you
coming
went
out.
back to no. We're back to no. It might be a mic connection.
Sorry. Can you hear me?
Yeah, I think it's a faulty connection, Jared. It sounds like 3D for a while.
Okay, sorry. Can anyone
Yeah.
else hear me?
So I see in the chat, it says like there's also an echo. So yeah, so they're hearing basically what I'm hearing. It sounds like you're underwater trying to swim and it's echoing bad audio. Okay, so as Jared's getting ready, once we are done with Mayor and Council, I'm gonna go ahead and cede the floor to Mr. Kamali so he can introduce who we have here from Toole Design, and they'll give you some information, and then definitely open the floor because we're here to hear from you guys. Go ahead, Jared.
Okay, sorry.
Yeah. We will put a pin if you, no, same thing. It's a lot of echoing, so it might be a bad connection, Jared. But I will say he's definitely very eager to hear from you guys, and he's also been pushing to make sure this comprehensive street and sidewalk study happens. That's the best estimate, but once he's able to connect better, he should be able to tell you guys. In behalf of me, yeah, I want you guys to know that we are not dismissed the petitions, but we decided to do a comprehensive approach. What we learned quite a few years ago was that if we do a comprehensive approach, we're able to not just like aim at what the biggest problems are, but also budget correctly in order to create a plan that 5 years down the line, you know, we tackled every year certain amount of like space in order to make it happen, and we reevaluate every year because we realized that some conditions might change through the process, and that's what happened with the former study. Either through weather or like different patterns that were changed, it allowed for different things to come up, right? And then we had to adjust as needed. So part of this was like, you know, the other thing is like to face is like, I think it sounds easy to say like, just put a bump in front of like, you know, my street, no big problem. But probably challenges we're also been facing, and the city manager could talk to you guys about this more, is companies have to bring X amount of equipment to come to the cities. And if they're coming in for 1 or 2 bumps, or if they have to go to different areas, the prices raised significantly high and compared to like coming in for quite a few of them, right? However, we also have heard from the community that we don't want to just solve the problem by putting bumps everywhere in the city, but it's to figure out what green alternatives could like be focused on, whether it's some of the things that Luke mentioned, right? The bumps out, like, you know, the gardens and stuff, to be able to address other things that we have to face. Some things that were part of like the last study was like raised bumps, right? So when we have schools, so that way the kids could walk on top of it, you know, so it's more visual for like little kids to be seen when people are driving, and it's a little bit safer. But overall, we have every intention to move this forward, and that's the reason why we decided to hire people that could get us a plan. So that way also when we go for funding, we have a plan together to make this happen, and not just moving one problem from one street to the other. We also realize that now there's funding for infrastructure through the infrastructure bill is perfectly key for us to have a plan together to do this, and not just like fix one street and then come back like 5 years when all the money is gone and said, oh, we need this other street, because that's not gonna help anybody. So saying all that, the whole team, mayor and council, and our staff is very eager to hear what Toole Design has to say, and also start working on the study and hear from you guys on what the challenges you guys have and what ideas are happening. So Mr. Kamali, I'm gonna cede the floor to you if you wanna add anything else, and to also introduce who's here from Toole Design. Mr. Kamali, the floor is yours.
All right. Thank you, Mayor and Council, and hello, community of Mount Rainier. I'm so excited that finally we're gonna have a traffic study that will resolve some of the issue that we encounter day to day. So I have the Toole Design, because time is very limited tonight. We're only meeting for 1 hour and 30 minutes. And I appreciate Mayor and Council, you guys have said enough. So I just go ahead and, you know, turn it over to James Elliott, who is the senior planner from Toole Design, and he has his team. So James, if you're ready, I'm gonna ask you please to continue our discussion, and let's see what the community is offering.
Yes, thank you very much, Mr. Kamali, Mayor and Council, and to all of you who are here tonight. We're really excited to be here and to have been hired for this project. As Mr. Kamali mentioned, I'm the project manager for our consultant team. Toole Design Group is a local transportation planning and engineering firm. We worked on a previous project in Mount Rainier. I'm here with several of my colleagues. It's not the full team, but our planning team. And they include Sean DeJour, Katie Heuser, Scott Harris, and Jay Swiderski. Next slide. So these are our goals for the meeting. We want to share a little bit of information with you about the study. We want to share a little bit about what we've learned so far, and we're really at the beginning of the process, so it's going to be somewhat limited. And then we're going to focus most of the meeting on learning from you about issues, opportunities, and priorities. Next slide. This is our agenda. We're going to talk a bit about the project, introduce that. We're going to have a little icebreaker to learn a little bit about you and where you come from. We're going to talk about what we've learned about the community's demographics, traffic crashes, and existing plans. We're going to talk about the community survey that some of you, I think, have probably filled out. And then we're going to break out into groups to talk in more detail about opportunities to improve traffic safety in Mount Rainier. So about the project, next slide. This has already been introduced. Mayor and City Council have already spoken a little bit about the project context, so we can move on. And they've also talked about the project goals. I'll just restate a few of them. One of the goals is to make Mount Rainier safer and more comfortable for pedestrians and bicyclists, while at the same time also making it more sustainable. And I think there are ways that we can do that by incorporating things like tree boxes and curb extensions with green infrastructure in them. Another goal is to reduce motor vehicle speeds. Our understanding is that is a major concern in the community, and cut through traffic as well. And then ultimately, the goal is to use the results from this study to apply for grant funding to pay for the improvements that are identified in it. Next slide. Now I'm going to talk a little bit about the project scope. First, and very importantly, it's public and stakeholder engagement. That will include this public meeting and a number of other activities. One of those is 3 focus groups that we're going to be meeting with. We're going to be giving a presentation to city staff, 2 presentations to the mayor and city council, and then we're also doing a survey, a community survey, online survey. This wasn't in our proposed scope, but we wanted to reach out beyond the group of people who are able to attend meetings to hear from them as well. And that survey is in Spanish. So that's one way we can reach Spanish speaking residents of the community. Next slide. We are going to be doing an assessment of existing conditions, which will include a review of existing plans. We've already done most of that work. We did a site visit with Mr. Kamali, where he introduced us to some of the key issues in the community. We're going to come back after we hear from you in this meeting and from the community survey to look at locations that were high priorities for you more closely. And then we're going to deliver an existing conditions memorandum. We are going to be also developing concept designs for the highest priority projects. We're going to be developing a design toolbox that can be used for projects that aren't on that high priority list to help design them. And then finally, we're going to be providing as needed assistance to the city for grants. Next slide. This is to give you a sense of the project schedule. We're really just getting started. We got started at the end of July, and it will run through March 2023. In December, we'll be delivering a project list and prioritization methodology to city staff and presenting it to them. We'll be delivering a presentation on our initial project recommendations to the mayor and city council in January. And then we'll be presenting the final project list to the mayor and city council in February of 2023. Next slide. Okay, now I'm going to hand it over to my colleague, Katie Hoyser.
Hi, everyone. We have a couple of questions for you all to get to know about your background and kind of what brings you here today. So I'm going to ask you to either pull out your phone or open up a new tab. We're going to be using a program called Mentimeter, which is kind of an online polling platform. So I'll give folks a minute to either pull out their phone or open up a new tab online and ask you to go to menti.com. That's MENTI.com. And we have a couple of questions just to get to know you all better. So once you go to menti.com, there's going to be a code you'll type in to join the poll. So our code, we could also drop this in the chat, is 19609986. And our first question is, do you live in Mount Rainier? And if so, are you affiliated with city council? Are you an employee? No, the mayor is here.
First question is the age.
Okay, let's see.
Correct. That's what I got as well.
Okay, let me.
I see it.
All right, confirm you can see where the do you live in Mount Rainier question?
There's no age option for people 35 to 44.
Let's see, one moment.
Can you give the code number again?
Sure, it's 19609986. And I'm going to try to reshare my screen to make sure we can get this going.
19609986.
All right, so are folks seeing the age question or the where you live question?
Do you live in Mount Rainier? Is there?
Excellent.
Okay, yes. Okay. Here, let's do this here, Jeff.
I'm doing it on the phone. You do it there.
Okay.
There's two of us.
Do you live in Mount Rainier? Yes.
Okay, looks like for the most part, we've got quite a few residents in the meeting. All right, let's move on to the age question. I recognize that we may, let's see.
Katie, I'm not
Okay, our
seeing.
second.
I'm not seeing the results on the screen.
How about that?
Great. Oh, awesome.
Okay, I apologize, everyone. Technical difficulties are always fun. All right, so to summarize, looks like we have quite a few folks who live in Mount Rainier and a couple who are on city council or a city employee. Our next question pertains to your racial or ethnic identity. And please let me know if you don't see this question show up for you.
I'm not sure.
It went back to the do you live in Mount Rainier question.
Okay. All right. Hold tight, everyone. Going to try to do this separate time.
There it comes up.
How do you describe yourself?
Okay, asking for your racial or ethnic identity. You're able to choose more than one here. Excellent. It looks like we got a fairly good mix here. I'm going to move on for sake of time. Our next question is age. Looks like for the most part, we got folks in the 45 to 54 range. I do recognize that we're missing one age category, so I apologize for that. I'll give another minute to the age question. We've got a couple young folks in the house.
Hi, this is Kira, a participant. Thank you so much for doing this. Just a note that there was a question in the chat. Is the meeting chat being monitored by someone? So just wanted to check on that. And there was a recommendation from someone that, those of us that are in the missing age group, that perhaps we could use that under 18, kind of assuming that there wouldn't be that many under 18. So just a little nuance to the results you're getting, but did want to check if someone's monitoring the chat. Thank you.
Yes, thank you, Kira. I appreciate that. Yeah, Sean, I know you're looking at the chat, but if you could call out in those important comments, that'd be very useful. I appreciate it. And this information is really helpful for us to understand kind of who we're reaching when we're publicizing these meetings and kind of future public opportunities associated with the project. Our next question, what best describes where you live? So our options are a single family home, semi-detached home, apartment building, condo. Might have another option or two in there. Multifamily home. So for the most part, we've got single family home is most common here. I apologize, I'm going quickly, but I'm going to go to the next one because I think this is a very valuable question. So we're moving into kind of questions about your habits as a pedestrian, as a bicyclist, or just someone who gets around town using their physical body. So the question is, why do you walk? Is it for recreation, for shopping, commuting to school or to work,
Hey,
social
Katie,
entertainment?
could you say the code one more time?
Yes, I will read the code again. It is 19609986.
Thank you.
And looks like recreation and health and exercise is very important for folks who are walking, as is shopping or going to the different stores. Social entertainment is also very valuable, which is very good for us to know. I'll give another minute to this question. So we have a small population who walk to bus stops as well, and a small portion of folks who commute by walking. All right, and our final question for this icebreaker is similar to the last one. Why do you bike if you do ride a bicycle? and the same questions or same responses. Looks like we've got some folks who don't bike, which I understand. Some folks who do for recreation, for social, seeing friends, seeing neighbors. Some who use it to shop.
If we joined the survey halfway through, is there a way to go back and answer the other questions or no?
There is not, but if you want an opportunity to share more information with us, we'll get into this later, but there's a community survey that we'd love your response on. But I appreciate your interest in getting participating in these questions as well. All right, I'm going to move back to the PowerPoint. I appreciate everyone for their swift answers and for working with me through the joys of technology. I believe I'm handing this off to Scott.
Excellent, thanks, Katie. Hi, everybody. I'm Scott Harris, another member of the Toole Design team. I'm going to walk us through sort of the first steps of the work we've done in Mount Rainier so far. We're going to first talk about a little bit about people who live in Mount Rainier, where crashes are happening today in the city, and then some of the work that's been done so far. So this first map shows the population density in Mount Rainier. There are roughly 8,200 people, as you can see here. The map shows the number of people per square mile living in each census block group, which is a pretty technical term, but each of the census block groups that make up Mount Rainier. So the important takeaway here is that the darker shading represents higher population density. So you can see in Mount Rainier that the denser areas are in the north and the sort of west-northwest of the city. Next, we're going to look at the race and ethnic makeup of Mount Rainier. You can see that a plurality of residents, about 45%, identify as Black or African American, about 32.5% as Hispanic or Latino, and about a quarter of Mount Rainier residents are white. So another map for you, we looked at households without access to a vehicle in our early work. And we found a similar pattern here as to what we saw with the population density maps. The number of households without access to a vehicle is higher in the north and west of the city around Arundel and Chilham roads than it is further south in Mount Rainier. And similarly, the population in poverty is higher. There are more households living in poverty in the north and west portions of the city, similar to what we saw with households with no vehicles and in the more dense areas of Mount Rainier. So that's our last demographic slide. We'll look quickly at vehicle crashes in the city. So between 2015 and 2021, there were 893 vehicle crashes in Mount Rainier, about 16% of which involved a serious injury or fatality. And of those that involved a serious injury or fatality, 20 involved a pedestrian and 1 involved a cyclist. So the map you're seeing here shows in particular those crashes that involved a serious injury or fatality to a pedestrian or cyclist. And you can see right away there are a couple of hotspots that jump out here. Namely the intersections of 34th Street and Rhode Island Avenue, and the intersection of Chilham Road and Queens Chapel Road. These are the darker circles that you see on the map. And in fact, the collision involving a cyclist was at Chilham Road and Queens Chapel Road. So just to kind of recap some takeaways here. We could have the next slide, please. Residential density in Mount Rainier is highest in the north of the city. It's also where the largest number of households having no vehicle or living below the poverty line are located. We're also finding that, perhaps unsurprisingly, that crash locations are concentrated at major intersections. And this is important because we know that households without a vehicle and those living below the poverty line are more likely to rely on walking, cycling, and transit for their daily commutes and daily errands. So we need to make sure, that these streets are safe to cross and comfortable to use. So after those analyses, we did a look at prior work that has been completed in Mount Rainier. We reviewed each of the plans you see here. This is the City of Mount Rainier Mixed Use Town Center Plan, the Mount Rainier Urban Green Infrastructure Master Plan, the Bicycle Master Plan, and the Comprehensive Street and Sidewalk Inventory, which was actually created by our firm in 2018, as was mentioned previously. So from these plans, we have developed some themes around what we've seen from prior recommendations. Next slide, please. Our analysis so far has found that most recommendations in Mount Rainier have been keyed to sidewalk and curb ramp issues, many of which have been completed in the last 5 years through the phasing program that was mentioned earlier. We've also seen several neighborhood and citizen requests for traffic calming, and we've seen recommendations for citywide bicycle signage and lane markings. And so lastly, we've developed what we call strengths and challenges, which is really just a summary of what we've learned so far based on the plans we reviewed on our site visits. These are basically factors related to biking, walking, and transit that position Mount Rainier well and that we think should be built upon, and then factors of concern that could be addressed to make Mount Rainier a more attractive city for walking, biking, and transit. So here we just have our challenges we identified that while there are lower traffic streets in the city, these lower traffic streets tend to invite higher vehicle speeds. As has been mentioned previously, several neighborhood streets are used as cut-throughs to avoid busier arterials. We observe that Rhode Island Avenue impacts connections between neighborhoods, essentially meaning that it can be difficult to cross for people on foot or bike. And then in a lot of spots in the city, we found that these sidewalks are relatively narrow, which can reduce comfort for walking. Some strengths we identified in Mount Rainier is that there's a lot of work already underway, and there's a lot of work that's been completed to improve sidewalks and curb ramps in the city. We're also noting significant community support for neighborhood traffic calming and safer walking conditions. And we also observe that Mount Rainier has a great street grid and good transit connections into DC. And so with that, I will pass it to our colleague, Sean.
Hello. If you haven't already, we strongly want to encourage you to take the survey. It's not a long survey, and it's also mobile friendly. So when you get a few minutes, tap into it. We offer it in English and Spanish. As you can see right there, we got 2 QR codes. So take the survey and encourage others to do so as well. Go to the next slide. Oh, somebody drop a link for the QR codes in the chat box, please. So far, we have received 115 responses. So that's a lot of data, and we want to thank y'all for that. We really appreciate the detail and care y'all have put into answering each and every survey question so far. It's been super informative. Also want to point out that it's not fully representative yet. We want to get as close to being as representative as possible. So far, here come some of the data. 71% of our responses have come from white residents, and white residents account for 25% of the population in Mount Rainier, whereas Black and Hispanic residents account for 45 and 32% of the population. But combined, they account for less than 15% of the survey responses so far. We still have a couple weeks. The survey closes on September 30th. So we got 11 days, and we would like y'all to help us out if y'all can. So if you know somebody who knows somebody and you think they'll add a valuable perspective to the survey, we encourage you to just nudge them and tell them to tap into the survey. Next slide, please. So this right here is a heat map, and we wanted y'all to help populate this by identifying areas you would like to see improved pedestrian access and safety. Now, a lot of the comments were concentrated in the southern and eastern parts of Mount Rainier, as you can see from the heavy concentration of red, but we want to get as much data from the areas highlighted in blue as we can. We want to ensure that things aren't only appearing blue because of the lack of data. We know that just because it's not showing up red or yellow, that doesn't mean that it's not a story there. So we really want to try, if we can, in the next 11 days to close the gap and get some of those underrepresented communities into the survey data. Next slide, please. So far, a lot of comments have been concentrated in the south along Rhode Island Ave, Eastern Ave, and north along Arundel Road and Queens Chapel. Next slide.
All right, our next slide is a question for you all. As Sean was saying, we haven't heard from folks who are people of color or maybe folks who live in apartment buildings. So we'd love to hear some ideas from you all about how to reach these groups. I do know someone mentioned in the chat that the survey is only online, which is true. So something we may consider is potentially doing a paper flyer, other paper not online outreach, use of flyers. I understand something you hold in your hand is always nice. That's a good point too about going door to door.
I would recommend putting the survey link up at where people meet, like at Glut and at the parks. You know, put the QR codes up there.
Sure. So I will say we have produced flyers for Mr. Kamali, and I don't know who else was distributing the flyers, as well as publicizing this on the city social media. But other ideas of where these flyers should go are very valuable. We're saying going near Queens Chapel in Chillum, probably 7-Eleven. It's a good point too that we do have the survey available in Spanish, potentially working with the schools as well. QR codes on the bus stop is a great idea. Front porch ministries, also great idea. Someone mentioned while apartment knocking may be useful, management may not be welcoming to that. Local businesses like laundromats. Excellent. We really appreciate these ideas, and we'll be working to see what we can do to get a wider reach for the survey. But again, thanks for everyone taking the survey and for helping us work through our outreach strategy. Now it's time to move on. As we were saying, a big part of this meeting is to hear from you all. So I'm going to move to a couple additional poll questions, and like Jim alluded to, we'll be moving to breakout rooms to have a more intimate discussion. So we can move again to Mentimeter. I think a couple of y'all already had that open for responding to that last question. And again, the same code, if you had it open, you should be able to continue. If not, you're welcome to join again, menti.com. And our question here is, what are some key destinations that you'd like to access either by walking, biking, or rolling? And I will say if you're unable to use Mentimeter, feel free to drop them in the chat as well. There we go. All right, someone mentioned the pool, City Hall, the Metro, 34th Street, recreational paths, great to know, and different MNC-PVC parks, downtown. Oop. Got excited there, hold on. Great, sounds like a variety of destinations. Very important for us to know as we're thinking about where to prioritize walking and biking improvements, especially those in the short term. All right, moving on to our next question. So this question is a ranking question. So I think you should be able to move these different elements in terms of the improvement locations that should be prioritized, whether that's in terms of funding in the short term or in the long term. I've got 5 location types here. Locations that have been fatal or serious crashes, locations where the concerns about speed, car speeds or yielding, locations where there's already lots of bikes and pedestrians, locations where people don't have access to cars, and locations where children are likely to be present. So it looks like I'm gonna let a couple people take their time to submit their responses. Got 7 folks so far. All right, looks like locations where there's vehicle speeding. Oh wait, things are moving very quickly on my end. Looks like locations where there's vehicle speeding are a high priority, as are locations where there's been crashes. Locations where children are is rising. So as we said, will be a big part of this project is prioritizing where improvements are located. So this is helpful for us to know these local values. I have another set of these questions, and then we'll get into our greater discussion. So we'll move on to the second question. It's similarly formatted, just some different responses. I think some folks might have responded to this already. So the second set of priority questions relate to location as well. Ones that would improve access to transit, locations that improve access to retail, locations where older adults are likely to be present, locations that would improve access to the Northwest Branch Trail, and locations that would address a gap in the sidewalk. Let's see, I'll give folks a couple more minutes to think about where their priorities lie in terms of these set of points. And someone mentioned that it's stuck on the last question. If you can't see this new set of questions, please let me know.
I can't see the new set of questions.
I can't either.
Okay, one moment.
Somebody mentioned that they refreshed it and then it came up. So if you're still having trouble seeing it, try refreshing the page.
Thanks, Sean. It should be working on my end, but I apologize. Can be fickle.
Okay, some people still refresh did not work for me.
Let's see, let me try one more thing.
Okay, so Kira said that signing out and signing back in work. So try to do that if anybody's still having trouble. Signed out 3 times. Okay.
It's up now.
Okay.
Thanks, everyone. All right, here we go. Comes the responses.
There we go.
Looks like locations improved access to transit, very important. We did see that quite a few people are walking to bus stops, and many folks mentioned that access to the metro is super important. As well as addressing gaps in sidewalks. Good to know.
Hey, can we clarify the question about what a gap in the sidewalk is?
Sure. So when we're thinking about gaps in the sidewalk, we're thinking about connectivity. So if there's maybe a full block or even just half a block that doesn't have a sidewalk, ideally we love sidewalks on both sides of a street, but especially if it's missing one half or the full half, that really compromises the quality of the walking network. And you want to be able to access everything on a sidewalk. So we're not really talking about cracks on the sidewalk, though that is important, especially for accessibility. But that question is really talking about places that are missing sidewalks.
Okay, yeah, and then I don't know if everybody's looking at the chat box, but Jay also offered another explanation. He said that's referring to places without sidewalks or with sidewalks only on one side, in addition to what Katie just said.
All right, looks like folks are agreeing. Transit access and very useful, as well as addressing those missing sidewalks. Okay, thanks everyone for your input. I appreciate it. I think we're going to move on to our discussion questions now. Let me pivot on my end. All right, as we mentioned, we are going to hop into breakout groups. We've got a lot of folks on the call today, which is really exciting, but that means we want to maximize the time that each one of you are speaking. So we're going to move into smaller groups so we can discuss some of these questions. The questions being, what would improve walking and biking in Mount Rainier? And where should these safety and access improvements be prioritized? So just to set some discussion ground rules, each group will have at least one moderator from the Toole Design team. We'll be taking notes, so everything that you say we'll be writing down and passing on to the right people, as well as having that inform the rest of the project. Everyone should be respectful, be listening to others. If you find yourself dominating the room, finish your thought and take a step back so everyone else may have a chance to speak. I know everyone's very passionate about safety and getting around town, so we want to make sure everyone has an opportunity to get their word in. Along the same lines, if you're not comfortable talking, but if you have a thought, feel free to use a chat box to communicate with us as well. I'm sure most of y'all have done breakout rooms by now, but I'll go through how it happens. Essentially, I will split us up into 3 groups. You will be asked to join the group. Looks kind of like this, a pop-up message. You'll click join, and we'll have maybe a little less than 30 minutes to discuss. I'll also give a heads up with folks when there's 5 minutes remaining. And then we will rejoin the meeting to discuss some next steps. All right, so if you give me a moment, I'll put everyone in breakout groups and then we can get on with our discussions. In the meantime, I'm not sure if there's any questions or things in chat we should bring to the full group.
Yeah, I just saw somebody, Lisa. She put in an announcement. She's a journalist, and she says she's covering the story on traffic sidewalks and the traffic in the sidewalk situation in Mount Rainier. So if y'all want to scroll up a little bit, you will see our contact information, and that's just another avenue to probably bring attention to everything. So that's something you feel like doing. Her email is up there.
Can we extend the meeting to 8:15 so people have a chance to talk for a few minutes, since it's already 7:30? Jim or anybody, or 8:10? I don't know
Yeah,
how much you're gonna have when you come back.
Yeah, I mean, I think so the breakout rooms, we're going to be there for about 30 minutes, and then we'll talk about next steps, and then we can spend more time answering questions and discussing after that. If it goes to 8:15, that's fine.
All right, give me one more minute. We should be ready to go. Okay, you should have gotten a message to move to your group. I will say, Jim, because you're the meeting host, I think you may need to join the group on your own. So I think if you click the breakout room tab at the bottom, you should be able to join room 3. Let me know if that does not work.
Recording in progress.
Okay,
Hello, everybody in here.
I think we are just about there.
Actually, good evening, people.
So I'm Scott. This is my colleague Sean, both of us from Toole Design Group. We've got a few more coming in here.
Yeah, probably maybe wait another minute or so.
Sure.
How many groups do you have?
Sorry?
Do we have 3 or 4?
Yeah, 3 groups.
3 groups. Yeah.
Okay. I suspect we're probably good here. We may have a couple of stragglers, but that's okay. I also think some people may have dropped off after the presentation.
Possibly.
But
Yeah.
we've roughly divided everyone into a breakout room randomly, just so that we could have a smaller contingent of folks, maybe have a little more one-on-one interaction is the idea. So as I said before, my name is Scott. This is my colleague Sean, both of us from Toole Design. we have 2 questions that Katie mentioned, and we're going to kind of try to take some feedback and have a discussion through a little bit of an interactive process. So I'm going to share my screen, although I can't seem to do that. So we'll hold on the screen share for the moment. But our first question is basically what would improve pedestrian safety and access in Mount Rainier? So if you want to start considering that, if anyone wants to jump in and offer thoughts, I'm going to send a quick message to our host to see if we can get the screen share up and running.
Of course, the number one thing to make streets safer is to slow down automobile traffic.
Right. That's probably my observation as well. I've been here for 6 years now, and I think I've seen it on the Facebook pages that it's really our neighbors that are speeding, and they're the ones who are also blowing through stop signs, you know. And when Mr. Kamali was going through, before he became city manager, and he was proctoring the installation of the speed humps, which were for the calming of speeds in our neighborhood. I'm actually at on Perry Street, and I did see traffic basically reduce because of maybe some of the signage. And then the bumps do work, I think, most of the time, but there are those acute sort of incidents where you see them as the same folks all the time, that it doesn't matter that there's a traffic calming device there. They just go boom, straight through. So I don't know what the solutions are going to be, whether it's a police kind of presence or if it's a citizen kind of empowerment to sort of enforce this. Maybe you guys can tell us what are some of the solutions that we all have implemented to slow down traffic or calm things, whether it's necking down the street. What are some of the things you've done in the past?
Thank you. One thing that I think would help improve pedestrian safety is crosswalks. We only have crosswalks on Bunker Hill Road. We don't have crosswalks anywhere else in the community for the most part. So I think crosswalks definitely gives pedestrians a feeling that they are in a place that they're supposed to be, and it alerts drivers, especially with the incoming self-driving cars. They can recognize crosswalks. So I think having crosswalks is really important, and to put them throughout the community.
And they're cheap.
And they're doable on a cheap budget, yes.
Yeah, I agree. I think having visibility is important. So, Kira mentioned trimming trees. That's just a huge kind of easy thing to do. And, increasing lighting. But the trees, are, at least in the summer, are really bad. But I agree with the enforcement piece, whether it be having more police. I don't see that much police down where I'm at 32nd and Arundel. So enforcement or cameras, maybe.
I think bump outs would be very helpful, because we live at a corner where there aren't crosswalks, but there are stop signs, and people, they just don't stop. They go right through the stop sign. They may even be making a turn without stopping. So we've had cars totaled, sideswiped, a tree run into and severely damaged because but I'm wondering if bump outs would slow them down.
Into that, I live in front of a three-way stop that rarely gets stopped at 29th and Webster.
Plant.
So I live on 36th Street on the 4000 block. My name is Alex. And we have a big issue with speeding, particularly on Bunker Hill. It's long, it's flat, it's straight. And like Valerie said, there are crosswalks on some parts of Bunker Hill, but not between 34th Street and 38th Street. Crosswalks are really cheap and easy. And, in that vein, I think something that might work really well is to some of the small streets. Right now, the parking is only on one side of the street. If we could move the parking to alternate sides of the street every couple houses, so you could say park 3 cars on the right, then 3 cars on the left, then 3 cars on the right. So cars have to swerve around parked cars, and there's no direct straightaway to accelerate. An engineering control like that is really cheap. It only requires paint. It doesn't require tree boxes, and it really would help slow down traffic.
That's great. Thank you. Alex, I think we may have met when we were in Mount Rainier.
Yes, we did. I saw you out in front of the house.
That's
So
right.
hello again.
Hey,
Yeah.
Alex, could you put what you just said in the chat box again? I want to make sure I captured that all the way. That was a
Okay.
really good suggestion.
Sure thing. I'm on the phone, so give me a second to type it up.
Okay.
And Joseph, I see a hand raised. Did you want to jump in?
Oh yeah, I just sorry, I got on late. I wasn't sure if we were doing hands or just talking, but I wanted to echo what Ed said. I think it was about the whole idea that you put down the speed bumps, they just speed. I mean, I've seen people do like crazy things just to go around the speed bump when there's not a parked car in their way. They'll like swerve all the way across the street to the wrong side just to avoid the speed bump. And I do worry about the parked car idea too, just because people don't leave their cars there all the time. So, sometimes a day people slow down more because of the parked cars, but then if everyone's at work and the kids are playing, then we have, that maybe is not there. So I like the idea of like bump outs. Plus, I personally have had a lot of problems with flooding on my street, and I got a house at the top, towards the top of the hill, but even so, I still wind up having floods on my street when it rains a lot. So having bump outs with native plantings to slow the street down, I think could have a lot of benefit. But yeah, we got to slow the streets, the people down. And then the last comment, and then I'll be quiet. I also would like to see if there's going to be more enforcement, have it be automated, because one, it's cheaper, and two, it's not as discriminatory.
This is Haukia. I would agree that any way you can slow down the automobiles, and I fully agree that more crosswalks would be the way to do that, visible crosswalks. I'm not sure I understand what a bump out is. Is that just like, could somebody explain that to me?
Yeah, sure. A bump out, there are probably a few definitions, but I think in its sort of most commonly understood form, bump outs are like extensions of the curb that come into the street, rather than having like a straight curb that runs all the way down the street. When you get to an intersection where there's a crosswalk, the curb moves, say, 4 to 5 feet or more into what was the roadway, and that creates kind of a pinch point for motorists, and it also narrows the crossing distance for folks on foot. And so it kind of attacks safety in a couple of different ways.
Okay, thank you.
And also a great spot, depending on the design and the location, can be a great spot for tree boxes or some sort of stormwater catchment, things like that.
Okay.
As a transportational cyclist, I'll say that bump outs are not necessarily desirable in every situation. They force you into the traffic lane and divert you from your straight line as a cyclist, at least.
That's a good point.
Not that I don't support them generally, but
sure.
We got 2 hands raised. I don't know who came first, but PTO and Gabriel, whoever want to hop in.
Gabe, you can go ahead first.
I'm going to turn this over to Ilana, who's sitting next to me.
Hi. A couple people mentioned this in the larger session, but I would say as a pedestrian and somebody who walks to the bus stop or tries to cross the perimeters of the neighborhood, I definitely am fearful every single time I have to do that. So along Eastern and Rhode Island, some of the pedestrian signs that say it's a crosswalk have been chopped off, or they're hiding behind a pole, or they're not there anymore. So I know that that's DC, and there's a couple of council members that we've been working with, so some of that is a bit of a challenge, but I've seen that along all the perimeters where it's just feels very dangerous personally, and I've talked to some folks at the bus stop who feel the same way.
Great, thank you for that.
So I wanted to acknowledge Phil's comment about the bump outs. I thought about that too, Phil, and you're right, that does impede cyclists, and it also pushes them into the traffic lane. So that puts us back at speed bumps, because I'm thinking of Upshur Street, which is also a long straight street that people tend to speed down, and they don't stop typically, and then they also turn off of it oftentimes without stopping or slow down minimally. So we're back to possibly speed bumps. We need something there to slow them down. If people aren't in the crosswalk, they're just not acknowledging the stops at all. I'm out gardening at the corner, and I have this term stoptional, but they're just not stopping.
I had a comment on the bump outs that I guess Phil had. I have seen bump outs where they don't actually, they're kind of like more like bump islands or something, so that there's like a bicycle lane worth of space in between the actual curb and the bump out, so the bicyclist doesn't have to go into the traffic. They can go on the little bicycle lane worth of space in between the bump out. I don't know if that would be a solution, especially on a rundle or something where we have more space, but that might be something that could, bump islands.
Yep, I agree. I think there are a lot of opportunities for, like design solutions in the right spots to accommodate bikes and still make safer crossings for people on foot. Just kind of a case by case. Yes, I'm sorry, we skipped over you. Please.
That's okay. I'll just address the back and forth on bump outs and just say that it might be the type of situation where some streets it makes sense to have little bump outs or islands, especially some of the streets that are a little bit more have more slope for things like capturing the stormwater. Whereas on flatter streets, it might not be a choice between just bump outs or speed tables. We could do a mixture of both throughout the community. And then so my name's Tim. I'm the longtime president of the PTO at one of the two local elementary schools. So just to fully disclose my main interest here, getting families being able to walk to and from school safely is the main reason why I'm here to participate. And Valerie raised the idea of crosswalks earlier. That's something that we would certainly support strongly along some of the most common routes to and from school. We have some on Bunker Hill Road right now, but most of the intersections on Shepherd Street, which is one of the other main pathways to school on the other side, does not have proper crosswalks. So at least getting crosswalks there. And then the first question that we used to kick this off was, what can we do? And I agree with trying to slow down automobile traffic, but I'd take it a step further and say anything we can do to get rid of some of the automobile traffic and get some cars off the road. Even if we could get 10 or 20 or 25% of cars off the road, that would make a significant impact. We do things at the school like promote walk to school days. And the whole idea there is that we don't want to have 100 different cars pulling up in front of the school in the mornings. So I know that we have to deal with cars because some people, especially people with disabilities, use them to get around, but I would err on the side of making the city more walkable and more bike friendly. And if people complain that it's a nuisance to drive around, I think that's actually a good thing.
Yeah, thank you very much. I appreciate those comments. So as you can see on the screen here, Sean has been, while we've had this discussion, Sean has been capturing each of these items as best he can. And you'll see that we have in the corner a low priority, high priority color scheme. we started off by listing everything as a high priority, but we know that just by virtue of making priorities, not all items can be high. Some have to take a, proverbial back seat. So are there items we've discussed that we think are a secondary concern that are important, but maybe they're not the most important? Anything that stands out to anybody?
Is there speed bumps listed? And that's different than bump islands. Is it the same thing?
I think we can get a speed bump.
I mean, the reality is no one likes them, but they really do slow traffic. And I mean, in my experience, that like being here like 20 years, that's one thing I avoid streets in a bad way because they don't have speed bumps. And if I think it's 30th doesn't have as many speed bumps, but if it had speed bumps, I'd have to slow up on every street. So
Jimmy, what you're saying is that speed bumps work on you.
Correct.
Exactly as designed. Great.
Yeah, I mean, and I try honestly in a bad behavioral method, try and avoid them because I can go a little faster. And so it'd be better if I didn't do that.
So it sounds like we should have speed bumps on every street in town.
I think so.
Just one other question. I don't know if you've looked into this at all, but there's probably ways to work with GPS technologies to route people away from going through the city. That might be a way to potentially look at doing something that, delivery drivers unless they know the routes, to route people around the city when there's traffic and such on Route 1 and Eastern Avenue.
That's a really good suggestion. I haven't heard that one before. I'm gonna definitely take note of that. Thank you, Valerie.
I have a suggestion.
Please.
Can you hear me?
Yes.
Hi, I'm Rosalind Resrick, 33rd Street. Talking about the proposed crosswalks in different areas, I was just thinking about the signage. Could you make sure that the signage is viewable? That there are no trees blocking it, and also the color of the proposed crosswalks. Is it possible to do like a neon reflective type crosswalk so that even in the evening time that people can see that it's a crosswalk? Does that make sense?
Yeah, sure, it does. That's a great question. You often, sometimes you see crosswalks that are just paint, right? Even if they're still white, you'll see other crosswalks that have sort of a glass bead material in them. And so in the evening, as the sun sets, car headlights hit that glass bead. I mean, I'm sure you've probably seen this driving or walking around. So then even in the evening, you can spot the crosswalk more easily. So that's certainly something we can explore in Mount Rainier.
Yeah, I'm thinking about like the reflective material that they put on gym shoes. You put that, like when cyclists or anybody running or something like that.
Could we tap into the artistic nature of this community and instead of just having plain white crosswalks, try to have street art in some intersections?
MUTCD.
The problem is how long do they last? We tried that at Bunker Hill in Rhode Island, no, Bunker Hill in 34th Street. I don't know, Bill, maybe 8 years ago, and it lasted 6 months.
I also, I walk frequently throughout the community, and I do notice that some drivers, when they do see somebody walking, do respect the crosswalk, and others don't. Maybe some don't, for the wrong reasons, but I think some don't because maybe they're not familiar with crosswalks, pedestrians, the laws here. They may be coming from other cultures. I don't know what kind of, training they've gone through to drive. Do we need to look at training drivers or better signage, like a big sign that says crosswalk here, people, arrow, stop, something, to help drivers who may not be as familiar with how do we interact with pedestrians here. I've lived in other countries and I've seen where cars just come right up to a pedestrian. There's just no concept. So how do we help educate some of the drivers that may need some education?
Well, I can answer that question. What we did earlier in the year, back in April, we conducted a detailed stop sign assignment for our officers. The outcome was 265 vehicles were stopped and cited for stop sign violations and not stopping at crosswalks. So, and we found out most of those motorists stated they were just familiar with the area and they didn't see the need to stop completely. So that education piece for many of them has hopefully helped them moving forward. But that's just one of the attempts we've made in these targeted areas.
Thank you.
Yeah, thank you, Chief. That's a useful piece of information to know that that was done. Thank you. I do want to move us along, and I think, Sean, we have an additional question. Am I right?
Stairs. We have 2 comments currently.
Yep.
Sure, yes.
One from Joseph and Gabe.
Sure. I'll be quick on this one. Tim got me thinking when he started talking about our artists in town. And I remember a study I read a little while back. It was about trying to get people to stop idling their vehicles, but I think it could be relevant.
We can't hear you, Joseph. You're breaking up.
I'll just put it in the chat.
Oh, you was good right there. It was a little bit muffled.
Oh, it must have just been how I was holding my mic. So anyway,
Yeah, there you go.
Okay. So anyway, Tim got me thinking about the artist, and I read a study a little while ago. It's about trying to get people to stop idling their vehicles, but I think it could be relevant to traffic too. And what they did was they compared signs that had eyes on them, so like a person's eyes looking at the driver, to signs that didn't, and found that people were more likely to obey the traffic law then. So I was wondering if maybe there could be some sort of artistic thing with that, with like essentially people staring at you near the stop signs, especially maybe in downtown.
There are definitely precedents for using sort of unconventional crosswalk painting methods. I think, as has been kind of mentioned here, there are some regulatory questions about that, but nothing that makes it impossible. And I think there are also occasionally questions, which we also heard here, on sort of the longevity of different materials. But both of those are addressable concerns, and sort of keep these artistic crosswalks, I think, in the toolbox.
I guess.
One last thing on speed bump. I'm sorry.
I wanted to chime in and just ask, what about talking about having a good grid pattern here? What about making some of the streets, disadvantageous by making them one way?
Yeah, I think I put that on the jam board. It should be in there about the increasing, more one-way streets. Yeah, I wrote that, and then I also expounded on it in my notes. I got a notepad here, and I'm putting y'all on the Jamboard too. I'm taking notes in 2 places.
Thank you. One other thought is along the lines of speed bumps, which I have been advocating, but I do understand we do have to have some routes for emergency vehicles, and so we're going to have to be cognizant of that as well. So just throwing that in the mix.
Good point. Gabriel, you had a...
Yeah, this is Alana, Gabe's partner. I was just thinking about the carrot and the stick, and looking to you all as the experts in this space, and you use the word toolbox, and I really like that, because when I think about the stick, I think about if you drive up Eastern from the north, there's a speed camera. So anyone who's done that and gotten the $100 speeding ticket like I have now avoids that intersection, or got a speeding ticket in DC because they're putting in more photo enforced streets. And then I was thinking about the carrot approach, which is like, you know, the crosswalks and those sorts of things. I know we need to achieve a balance of the two, but I'd be curious for, you know, the next steps of what are the realistic tools, given Mount Rainier is not a big city like DC, for what tools would be in our toolbox? Because even though it's nice and I think very effective to put in speeding cameras, I mean, I see speeding cameras, I've gotten tickets for not in DC for not stopping completely down to 0 miles per hour, or for going, you know, 5 miles above the speeding limit. But seeing as though, you know, we're obviously not going to be able to do all of those, it would be interesting to see what are the tools that would be most effective given the smaller area that we have and other factors.
So I think that's a great point, and I'm glad that you mentioned that, because I think, you know, when we look here and we think about prioritizing interventions or prioritizing projects across the city, you know, I see here like install speed cameras, and I feel similarly about that, you know, these are very useful tools, but there are a lot of logistics, a lot of expense behind their implementation, right? And that's not necessarily always practical. I would say that the analysis on what tools will be in the toolbox really is the next phase of this project, right? You know, we at Toole kind of know at least a good portion of the universe of tools that exist. And our hope is that through some further work in Mount Rainier, we'll know which tools are really practical and useful and repeatable for the city. But I mean, the hope, right, is that we can deliver a toolbox that can be pulled from, just to keep the metaphor going, that can be pulled from, you know, repeatedly and always lead to success. You know, we don't want to propose something that is, you know, impractical for the city to achieve, or that only achieves an improvement at a single point in the city when we're trying to do a more comprehensive approach. So that's a long way of saying that the next phase, the next task in this project is to really start honing in on those tools.
Want to get Jim before we probably go back to the main room?
Yes.
Yeah, just 2 quick questions. I'm here to listen, but basically, I think one way only works as the traffic if there's actually other ways to slow traffic, because one way itself actually speeds up traffic. So you'd have to have like parking on both sides or something else. And the second thing is, I think enforcement, we don't have enough of a police force, enough people get stopped, and that it really, my sense that you really need physical efforts like speed bumps. That relying on enforcement sounds nice, but we just don't have enough officers in our department to actually stop people from speeding. It's been my experience. Thank you. Thank you. I think the comments have been good.
So I think I don't know if we have a second question, Sean. Is there a second question on the Jamboard? Oh, no, we've reached the end of our time.
Yeah.
So the next step of this meeting, right before we wrap up tonight, is that you'll shortly be dumped back into the main room. And I think that the rest of the team's going to cover some next steps. So you're invited to hang around for that and kind of hear where this project's headed. I would say, again, thanks everyone for your time tonight. We really appreciate being here. We really enjoyed our time in Mount Rainier a couple weeks ago, and we're looking forward to coming back. So again, thanks for the great conversation, and I hope to speak to you soon. Thanks very much.
Thank you.
Recording in progress.
Okay, great. I think probably some people are still rejoining the group, so we'll wait a second for them to do that. See, how many people do we have?
I think everyone is back in the main room now. So if you want to take it away with.
Great, yeah. So next steps. So there's a next step for you all, which is if you haven't taken the survey, please do take it. It's going to be a very important piece of information for us going forward, in addition to the feedback provided during this meeting. As Sean mentioned, it's not currently fully representative of the population of Mount Rainier. So we could use your help distributing the survey to other folks to make sure to try to get it to be more representative. So that's kind of the task for the group here, to do that survey. And then for us, the key output that we're going to develop by March is to develop a list of priority projects based on your feedback, based on follow-up field work that we're going to do, and then concept designs, and finally guidance for implementation of other types of design guidance. So those are the two items for us. And so with that, I want to thank everybody for attending the meeting and open it up for questions and answers.
And Jimmy, I see your hand. You have your hand up.
Yeah, I first of all, I appreciate the presentation. I thought the discussion in the breakout rooms was productive. But having been here for a while and having gone through a lot of studies, I think you have to realize that the people who participate doesn't represent the whole community. The people who pass out surveys and whatever we want to do, we can do that. But I guess I'm saying you gotta also use some common sense. And I've been through studies where they listened to the people in the room and they didn't have a whole picture. So it's very important that we hear the community comment, but it's very also important that people who are the Toole Design people actually take a step back and see what else is going on in the city, whether it's through looking around or not, that you not just completely rely on the surveys and the feedback, because whatever we do and whatever we try, we're just not going to get a representation that represents our community. So it's good to hear it, but don't rely on it, 100% or even 80%. Thank you.
I appreciate that comment. And it's one of the reasons why we ask demographic questions, so that we're aware of who we're hearing from. And we can also look at their responses specifically. So I think that's why those questions are so helpful to us. But even with that, we need to understand that this is not a full representation of community opinion on this issue. Deanna?
Yes, I was going to ask that, once we have the final survey or final results, and then Toole Design issues its report or its suggestions, and then everything is finalized, that the city makes sure to post that on its site so that residents do have access to it. And I guess that's only those of us who have digital access. You may need to also think of ways to post it so others can see too. What are the results of the survey? And then, what is Toole Design proposing? And then what's the final decision, so that there's a total transparency and accountability to the citizens. Thank you.
Thank you for that comment.
I would like to know if the Toole Design Group or the city could make a short informational video with the information that was in the presentation part of this. I'm sure a recording will be shared, but a 90-minute Zoom call is not the most efficient way for a lot of people to get access to this info. And it may actually increase engagement. Maybe just cutting it down to the slides and that had the key info, I think would really go a long way. Keeping people informed.
And we could post that on the, I don't know, is there an access, TV, cable access, or as well as a website so that people who have TV could access it?
I don't know, Karash, Mr. Kamali, do you want to weigh in on that?
Well, we could do that. That's a good idea. If you guys can, make it a short video, we can have communication to post it on city's website and have people, to have a better access. And some people may not have any, digital access. So somehow that would be a good idea. And as long as you guys provide it to us, the city will take care of it.
Do we still have a community access channel like we used to?
I'm sorry, I'm not familiar with that. Is it a community access channel? You mean the channel 71 that is it streamlining that one? Are you talking about that one?
Yes, that's what she's talking about.
I think, yeah, that it's still there. Jared, are you there? Let me ask MRTV and see, maybe he can weigh in.
It used to be channel 21, but I've not been able to tune into it for a long time. At least on Verizon.
I mean, Jimmy, you had a TV show. Do we still have, we had a studio in the basement of City Hall. Is that still there, or where are we?
Well, let Mr. Kamali get back with Jared. I mean,
yeah,
we have a Comcast. I'm looking at 21. I'm not sure what the channel is, but a lot of people don't use Mr. Kamali, web, and we actually use that channel to broadcast the council meetings and other kinds of things like this. So maybe we can see. I haven't seen it in use for a couple of years. Maybe somebody else would know. But yeah, I'm not sure why we're not using it.
I don't know if this reflects how many people this reflects, but I mentioned this meeting to neighbors, and the response was they were not attending because they specifically wanted to know why it was not in person. I don't know how many people are not here because they felt that way, but I'm just mentioning it.
Thank you for noting that.
If I could ask hopefully a quick question, and I'm not looking for an answer right now, but just a question. So I believe it was mentioned earlier that the survey deadline is 11 days from now. My question is, just generally, why, and can that be extended? If our concern is outreach and having good representation or a different kind of overall representation on the survey, and additional time is needed to reach the people that we want to reach, can that date be adjusted by a few days, by a week? But I would put it forth to say, if we're concerned about our data, can the due date be changed?
Yeah, I think it probably could be adjusted a little bit, but we have a deadline to meet, and we need to process the comments that come in. It doesn't do us any good if people are providing valuable feedback and then we don't read through and absorb it all. And we need to do that. And we need to. So I think the answer is that yes, we could do that probably for a week, or maybe 2 weeks, but not for another month.
Is there another meeting planned, especially maybe one that would be down by the apartments?
So that's something that we I'm going to have a conversation with Mr. Kamali about after the meeting, whether there will be additional public outreach as part of this project. The scope that we have was what I presented earlier. So we have the 2 presentations to the mayor and council. We have a presentation to city staff. We have this outreach survey, which is something that wasn't in our scope, but which we have done because we know that there's a need to reach beyond just the meetings. But whether or not additional outreach is included really depends on kind of a negotiation with the city.
I think just, from this city account, my council position, it's a balance. We want to get as much survey. There's actually a realistic limit to how much we're going to get through these surveys. And on the other hand, we've already been criticized for delaying implementing, as we speak and as goes on, there are accidents and children are at risk. So we want to make sure that we actually implement this program in a timely fashion. So I think we weigh these things, and yeah, I think it's possible to do a week and even have another outreach while, so even while they're working a study, there's no reason to have another outreach so they can't refine their report. So maybe we could talk to them about having another outreach group, but we don't want to extend this thing. So we extend actually doing the work that has to be done.
A question about the focus groups. Is there any way to incorporate people from the apartments into the focus groups if that's separate from these community outreaches?
Yeah, potentially. We identified 3 focus groups. One was a group of pedestrian and bicycle advocates. One was people connected with the schools in the community, and the third was people with disabilities. So, I mean, we could adjust our approach to that third group. We already have, I think, some conversations going with the second group for the schools.
Yeah, I was gonna say that can we contact the schools and maybe create a flyer and send it with the kids home if the schools will allow it?
Yeah, I mean, that's potentially a good avenue for outreach because so many people in the community, or many people in the community, probably have children in the schools, and that would be a way to reach them.
Rainier Manor, were they on your list for focus group number 3? And they do have a sort of a community meeting. I think it's the 4th Monday.
They actually have 2 different meetings. They have 2 different buildings, but yeah. That would be actually a good place to go because they have major traffic issues there. I could send you the contact there.
Yeah, thanks for the recommendation. Any other questions or comments before we close?
I would just say I did mention this meeting to the PTO, and they have blasted it out a number of times for Mount Rainier Elementary School. And I think we should also do the same for Thomas Stone Elementary School and make sure that, I mean, if there's a way to have, either somebody watch the pedestrian traffic and the vehicular traffic during the morning rush hour and also with all the buses going around town, like watching all that. I think that's really important to kind of capture where people are walking and how they're walking and how they're biking and how they're getting around it, Yeah.
All right. Any questions in the chat? I haven't been monitoring it very closely that we should be responding to.
Somebody asked if the apartment complexes had a community listserv. I see somebody just dropped contact Mount Rainier Manor.
So the Rainier Manor is one of the leaders in the Rainier Manor. That's the senior citizen two buildings on Queens Chapel Road.
Okay.
And the other thing is to outreach to, and maybe somebody can contact the managers in the three major apartment complexes: Kaywood Gardens, Queenstown, and what's the other, Queens Manor. And so maybe somebody could give Mr. Kamali the contacts there. Maybe they could reach out to the managers there.
We have already given them the flyers the day that we were, distributing in the city. So we reached out to the leasing office and they told us that they're gonna reach out to their residents. But we can go back and, be in a communication with them again.
Any more questions or comments before we close the meeting?
Just thank you for, it was a good discussion. Just, let's keep on going.
Thanks everyone for participating. Really appreciate it.
Thank you all for coming and for sharing your thoughts.
Take care.
Have a good evening.
Thank you.
All right, thank you, everyone, and thank you, Toole Design team. We'll be in touch.
Thank you so much, everyone, for coming tonight.